All right, hi there. My name is Xavier Martinez. I'm with the Washington Voting Project again. And again, it's always a privilege to be in the Zoom call with these candidates. And today I am sitting down, well, I guess over Zoom, and speaking with candidate for 7th State Legislative District, candidate for State Representative, JJ Wandler. Hi, sir.
Hi.
Great to be here with you. Thank you for taking time out of your day again. We really appreciate it. A little bit about this interview or conversation. It's kind of the vision with all of this is to have just that, a conversation, and not necessarily an interview. Hopefully myself, and by extension, the constituents in your district and everyone in the state of Washington will be able to learn about yourself, the policies you support, and also your personality. It's a super important part that I think is also underlooked. But yeah, unless you have any questions or any preliminary introductions, we can go right into some questions that I have just to kind of guide the conversation along.
No, sounds great. Let's get started.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So I was going through your campaign website, some of the articles that were written about you, and as I understand, you've moved around a lot in terms of the state of Washington in your life. But specifically, I guess, I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about where you grew up, your childhood, and then how you ended up calling Spokane County, right, and the 7th District your home.
Well, sure. I was actually born in Spokane. I spent my very earliest years in Spokane, moved to Central Washington as a child, and went through all of my grade school and high school years in East Wenatchee, Washington. I was a Eastmont Wildcat. If I know correctly, you were a Wenatchee Panther.
That's right. Theoretically, I shouldn't be speaking to you right now. So this is a monumental moment, right?
Well, it all depends on who won the Apple Bowl, I guess,
Right. Yeah,
Anyways,
that one for us.
Once I graduated from high school, I moved back to Spokane, went to college at Eastern Washington University. I graduated with an English degree from Eastern. Upon completion, I moved to Seattle and got a job with Amazon.com right off the bat. Worked there for a couple of years. I saw some things going on there that didn't bode well for my future employment and the employment of my coworkers, and we attempted to form a union in an attempt to get better working conditions and to save our jobs. Predictably, Amazon laid off the entire department instead of letting us unionize. I went from there into the restaurant industry. I had waited tables and bartended in college, and so I went back to that in Seattle, eventually opening my own restaurant. I still own that restaurant to this day. It's been open for 12 years. About 5 years ago, we were expecting a second child and decided that a good place to raise children would be back here in Eastern Washington, where I had family and the cost of living was lower. Rents were less expensive. Traffic was not nearly as awful as it is in the Seattle area. And it just seemed like a smart move for us. I live up in North Spokane County in Meade, which is really at the southern end of the 7th Legislative District. But that's how we got here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the 7th Legislative District, as I understand it, is quite large. I mean, it goes all the way to Okanagan County and obviously to Spokane County in the south and over to the northeast corner. I guess, what is it like for you to be running to represent that entire geographical area? Do you see a lot of variance in the values that people hold to be, or people find, or people are passionate about, or or is it relatively similar across the district? As you've kind of done your research and gone throughout the district?
Well, it is challenging, basically because it's such a very large district. I'm not. It may be the largest district in Washington State. I'm not absolutely certain about that. I'd have to look, but it's certainly one of the largest. You know, it's largely rural, with some population centers. I would say that my experience has been that that the demographics are largely conservative, and that seems to be kind of across the board. Rural districts kind of lean that direction typically. The North Spokane County also includes part of the city. It includes also part of out towards the Airway Heights. It's cut up in kind of a strange way, with some peninsulas sticking out into other areas, and other districts like chopping up other spots, because representation is based on population. So they had to include, certain population centers. So it's a mixed bag to a certain degree. But I would say that, there's definitely a conservative history in this district.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And kind of an extension of that is, and tying back to the last question, is given all the experiences that you highlighted you had, from going to school in Eastern Washington, to owning a restaurant in Western Washington, to working all the jobs you mentioned on your campaign website. Between those, I guess, do you feel that working with all those different types of people, or people from different backgrounds, you feel like that gives you a good idea on what what you want to fight for if you're elected, the issues that you hold to be significant in your mind, and if those are an accurate reflection of the issues that the people that you've encountered in your life hold to be significant?
I absolutely believe so. I come from a working class background. I've worked construction. I've worked with my hands. I've worked in the restaurant industry. I worked for a short time as a reporter for a small weekly Central Washington newspaper. So I come from those people. That's my background. So I really do believe that I can represent the people of the district well, because that is my background. That's where my family is from. I come from a family of teachers and mechanics and construction and people who create things.
Right. Absolutely. That's fantastic to hear. And then I guess I'm curious, in this time of the pandemic and stuff, and going back to living in or running for a seat in a very large district, as well as managing your family life and your work life, what have you been doing for your campaign? I guess I'm just curious, as someone who isn't located in the 7th district, I'm curious what you've been doing to get out there and appeal to the voters.
Well, it's been really challenging. It's a non-traditional campaign year because of COVID. We haven't been able to do in-person meetings. We haven't been able to kind of hit the campaign trail, so to speak. There's no shaking hands or doorbelling or any of the type of traditional stuff that's associated with a campaign. I've been attempting to do social media outreach with limited success. There are campaign laws in place in Washington State that make social media a difficult way to reach voters. I've answered questionnaires and sought support from different organizations in the state. I'm always happy to do these type of interviews. Anything I can do to kind of get the word out there. My campaign has a lot of campaign signs, but my ability to get those to potential voters has been limited by my ability to get the word out there.
Right.
Later this week, I'm planning to hop in my car and drive through the district with a stack of signs and just start putting them out in public areas wherever I can get them. But right now I've got a stack of bumper stickers and pin back buttons and no way to get them to people. I had anticipated earlier this year that COVID may have gotten under control and that I would be able to go to some county fairs and, typical kind of meet and greet opportunities. And obviously none of that came to pass. Every county fair got canceled in my district. We're still under very limited reopen conditions, which is really, I think, doing a disservice to a largely rural area. But, so it's been a difficult thing. And, additionally, I've signed up for a few candidate forums that have notified me that they're not going to hold them because my opponent in the race has declined to participate, and they can't really have a candidate forum without two candidates to speak. So I don't know if that's a political expedient on his part to, he's a 8-term incumbent, so he's already got name recognition, and I'm unable to get out there nearly as much.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're not alone in the struggles of a quarantine Zoom campaign, right? So
Absolutely. No, we're all kind of stuck in the same boat here.
Totally. But it's good to hear that you're getting out there, and I hope your drive goes well later this week. You mentioned something there, though, that I kind of wanted to talk about, and that's, you're talking about restrictions and in rural areas. I think, that topic of COVID reopening, COVID in general, has been a huge topic. It's been something that's certainly changed, I think, the course of politics in the U.S., across the board in Washington. I guess I'm curious, first of all, how COVID has affected your district specifically.
Well, like I said, county fairs, which are a big yearly social gathering, have all been shut down. We've got businesses that are shutting down and won't be able to reopen. Financially, they're taking a hit. The whole state is financially taking a hit. It being a rural district with extremely low number of cases, in several of the counties, 0 cases, but we've had a blanket, mandate for shutting businesses in a stay-at-home order, that these counties were adversely affected without really having the numbers to back it up. We were doing a one-size-fits-all response to the pandemic, which I think did a disservice to a lot of folks in the communities in the district. I absolutely believe and know that COVID-19 is real. It's dangerous. My mother had it. She recovered, but she was the sickest. She's 73 years old. She said she was the sickest she has ever been in her entire life for 3 weeks. She has underlying health conditions. It was a very scary experience. I wasn't sure that she would make it through. I have friends that have also had it and have described the experience as awful, like an intense flu. So I know that COVID is real and that we need to take real precautions. And I 100% supported the initial shutdown that the state put in place to give our hospitals and clinics a chance to prepare for what they thought might be a huge influx of patients. The whole idea of flattening the curve. And in the initial stay home order, I supported all of that. I think, though, that now 6 to 7 months later, we haven't seen any county move past the phase they've been stuck in for a couple of months now. There doesn't seem to be any phased reopening necessarily happening anymore. I think that the initial mandate that people may have supported has expired, and that we're all aware of what the best practices are now. We have a state mask mandate. We know about social distancing. We know about the importance of washing hands and using sanitizers. And I think that we need to start reopening businesses that have been adversely affected, because we're losing so many small businesses right now, permanently losing them, and that's people's life savings, that's their livelihood, and that's a huge negative for our economy.
Right.
It's tricky. We know that our number of cases have gone down based on some of the safety precautions that we put into place. And I would probably support a lot of that more if we had more of an economic recovery plan coming out at the state level. But I haven't seen anything that's an economic recovery plan that's going to help displaced workers, persons who have lost their businesses, their livelihoods, and their life savings that were wrapped up in businesses. There hasn't been any sort of economic recovery plan put forward to address that.
Right. Okay. And then that feeds right into my kind of piggyback question off of that, which is, I guess, what would you do differently given these maybe negative aspects of the reopening that you've seen? What it would be the Wandler reopening plan or the Wandler economic recovery plan, and if you can be as specific about it as possible, that'd be fantastic.
Well, number one, I mean, I haven't met with economists.
Right. Sure. Given the information that you have.
Certainly. So what I'm going to say hasn't necessarily been vetted by an economist. But, I think number one, we know best practices. I think it's time to reopen the economy, especially in lower risk areas. I think we should move completely forward.
So I guess, what do you mean by reopening the economy? Does that mean like opening restaurants to capacity? Does that mean allowing all sorts of businesses to be open at this time? Could you maybe just expand on that?
No, I think so. I think that means that we allow restaurants to open to capacity. I mean, people are going to protect themselves as well, and that restaurants need to adopt best practices as well, Right. But most of the bars and restaurants have been unable to do counter seating as a result of these. And I think it's time to go ahead and reopen counters, to expand people's capacity. I'm a restaurant owner, so
Totally.
So I understand more than as much as most what this means. My restaurant's revenues are down 75 to 80%. We are just barely surviving. We're staying just open just enough to pay the basic bills and to keep our employees on. But so that's one of the things is it's time to reopen using best practices. Number two, we're looking at a giant budgetary shortfall based on the businesses that we've lost, the amount of revenues that we've lost from sales tax, from gas taxes, from all of the ways in which the state gains revenue. So what I would say as an economic recovery plan is that we're going to need to look at new revenue sources. And from everything that I've seen, the persons that have profited most from this pandemic are the billionaires. Bezos and Gates have seen their fortunes rise, while the working class and the working poor have been adversely affected. So what I support is a 3% wealth tax on incomes over $1 million to help make up the budgetary shortfalls that the state is facing, and to spur an economic recovery for businesses that are hurting right now. and that would also include a corporate income tax. We have $2 trillion valued companies in this state. Microsoft and Amazon, $1 trillion valuations, and we do not have a corporate income tax. If anybody is gaining from the infrastructure and the education systems that Washingtonians have put into place and paid for since Washington's been a state, it's these corporations with these enormous valuations. And I think that we need to look at them to make up our lost revenue. They need to pay their fair share, in the middle of this pandemic. So I don't support any new taxes on working class people. I don't support a sales tax increase or a gas tax increase or a cigarette or an alcohol or a marijuana tax increase. None of those that adversely affect or regressively affect our working class people. It's time that trickle-down economics means that we tax the very rich, and that money trickles back into our state coffers.
Right. That's very interesting. And building off the taxes that you just spoke about, judging by that and by reading your campaign website, one of the taxes that I think is often talked about in Washington State that you didn't really mention is a carbon tax, whether that be on the general public or on corporations. What is your stance on a carbon tax?
If we get a carbon tax, it needs to be on corporations primarily. I don't think that the people of Washington State need to be the guinea pigs for any of these new tax initiatives. I think that we need to go to the top with this stuff initially. The people who are making the most money need to bear the biggest burden. As with the Green New Deal, I don't support many of what I've read or the most sorry
no
the
worries.
most radical elements of the Green New Deal, but I support it in general terms, renewable energy and carbon taxes, but I think that all of that stuff, there need to be zero loopholes for major corporations and major polluters. They need to be 100% responsible first, and once they have implemented, those things, then the rest of us can start talking about it. They have successfully pushed off their responsibility on the rest of us for far too long. The idea that we'll save the planet if we all individually recycle while they pollute the rivers is absurd.
Right. So I'm curious though, when it comes to taxing corporations, as I understand it, it's a pretty slippery slope, because worst case scenario, a corporation could just move all their business out of the state, right? I mean, take for example Boeing, right? They're recently announced they're planning on moving some of their operations for a specific type of plane. I don't know the details, and I don't exactly know.
737 Dreamliner.
Right. Out of Washington, and again, I don't know exactly. I haven't read up on it as well as I probably should, but I imagine part of that may be due to the threat of a potential tax or something like that. So I guess when it comes to balancing, and again, that might be a terrible example, but I think regardless, the question still stands. When it comes to balancing the interests of the state's balance sheet in terms of bringing in revenue and jobs from corporations being here, and taxing those corporations at a higher percentage, is there a line that you draw in terms of percentage, in terms of the threat of businesses leaving the state? I know it's kind of a vague question, but kind of what's your opinion on all that?
No, absolutely. We've given Boeing billions and billions of dollars in tax incentives, and yet we've gotten no loyalty from them. There hasn't been a new tax against Boeing. What they're doing is they're reacting to shareholder pressure and moving stuff out so that they can maximize their profits. There's nothing we've done that is negatively impacted Boeing at this point, except for give them billions of dollars in giveaways, which could be benefiting the people of Washington State. Now, obviously, I don't want to tax corporations out of existence or even to tax them to the point where they move. A minimum corporate tax on $1 trillion corporation, a tax of 0.5%, is
Right.
almost nothing, but that's enough to help the people of Washington State. We don't have to throw 30% taxes on these corporations. We don't want to chase them away, but we want to take a little bit to help the people.
Totally. I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that we want to, I'm not a tax and spend person. I think that we also most definitely need fiscal responsibility at the state level too. If I've heard anything from the constituents in the 7th legislative district, is that they believe that any tax money that we raise is just going to be squandered by fiscal irresponsibility at the state level. I believe in fiscal responsibility, but I also believe that if we raise that tax money, that we can benefit the most people with it. That's important to me. And that's like through a state health plan.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to clarify that point to make sure it wasn't vague in any sense. Yeah. So we're almost out of time, and I don't want to take any more time out of your day than you've already committed to. I just have a couple more questions, though. Sure. Talking a little more broadly in terms of politics, I know political polarization has been a pretty hot topic in the news across politics recently. As you who are someone who is relatively new to politics, is that something that you've noticed within your races, within your legislative district, within the Washington, political sphere?
Absolutely. I mean, it's there. I'm running as an independent.
Right.
I have parts of my platform come from both sides of the aisle. I'm a little hard to categorize that way. It's actually like it's putting me in a difficult situation because I'm not getting endorsed by anyone. But I've through social media, I've posted some stuff to people in the district, and I've been met with some negative responses, and not negative based on the ideas, but based on some partisanship. I've been accused of being a Democrat that's trying to dress things up as an independent, which is far from the truth.
Right.
And I've been called a commie and a socialist, and and I'm not either of those things either. I definitely borrow some things from a democratic socialist platform. There's no doubt about that. But I also have some extremely conservative views on other aspects, which is why I couldn't conveniently follow either of the parties. So I've definitely felt it, but what I've done is I've approached that with a level head, and I've responded to those people respectfully and with ideas. And as long as I carefully give them the ideas, I've found that many people that wanted to attack me support, in essence, the ideas that I stand for. They know that is stuff that we actually need. They're just worried about how we're going to get there. Right. Nobody wants anyone reaching into their wallet and taking more money out right now. And I don't support that either. I support starting at the top. Far too often, we give the tax breaks to the people at the top, and everyone else bears the burden. And I think it's time that we turn the tide on that.
Totally. One last question. As someone who, as you just mentioned, encapsulates so many of these partisan values into one, and also just American values into one platform, someone who's had so many experiences throughout the state, what is the number one issue going into November? What is the number one thing that, if you're elected, that you want to tackle first? What's the number one issue at hand in the state of Washington and in the 7th legislative district?
Well, you know, there's many things I'd love to tackle, but everything right now stems from COVID-19. You know, it's really shown up what some of the, you know, what some of the problems with our current system are. So tackling COVID is going to require us to look into revenues. It's going to require us to look into healthcare. I mean, my main thing that I'm running on is, you know, the healthcare mandate, is getting universal healthcare for Washington State. That's one of my biggest platform items. You know, basically because of what we've seen with the COVID response, and with people losing healthcare as they lost their jobs, hundreds of thousands of them lost jobs, lost employer-sponsored healthcare. They're falling through the cracks, and if they get sick, it's a choice between you know, bankruptcy, or losing their home, or mortgaging what they have, or losing their life savings, and seeking out the care that they need. Those are not choices that anyone should have to make. I have extremely conservative friends that feel the same way, that a cancer diagnosis, or an automobile accident, or a COVID-19 diagnosis should not cost you your life savings. There has to be a different way of dealing with this. So, you know, healthcare is a huge one for me. The way in which we're going to pay for this stuff is a wealth tax. And the best way for our state to continue moving forward is through a state bank that keeps our money right here.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I'm sure that voters can read up all about your platform on your website and in the voter's guide. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day again. Really, really, really appreciate it. It was fantastic to speak with you.
Great, thank you. Great speaking with you too.